Crimea is a threat for security in Europe, and I give the floor to Berezovets, who will moderate this discussion. Good morning, dear colleagues, experts. We begin our press conference, and which was organized together with the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center and Free Crimea project, and which dedicated to those issues, military issues, which are taking place on the territory of annexed Crimea. The topic of the presentation is militarization of Crimea as a threat to collective security of NATO. You know that yesterday in Turkey, the events of NATO and such issues, the militarization of Crimea was in the resolution as a separate paragraph, and it was about intentions of Russia to place means carriers and nuclear weapons, and that's a direct threat not only to countries of the region, Black Sea region, but also that's a threat to interest and military security of the whole NATO bloc. We invited to this press conference the most respectable and known Ukrainian experts in the field of defense studies and military studies and science, and there's Grygoriy Perepelytsia, who's an expert on international security and foreign policy, my old friend Igor Koziy, and he's from North-Atlantic Cooperaiton, Judge of Civic League of Ukraine, NATO, and Oleksandr Musienko, who is the head of the Center on Military Law Studies. You know that these events are taking place with the background of 70 years anniversary of the deportation of Crimean Tatars, and we will have the day celebration on the 18th of May, and Mustafa Jamilov, there are events in Kyiv University dedicated to that event, but we will speak about the military threat, which is a threat not only for NATO countries, but also it's a direct threat to citizens of Ukraine who live in Crimea of all nationalities, and there is also a direct threat to Ukraine. And I have the first infographics prepared by experts of Free Crimea, which is called Militarization of Crimea 7 Steps, and all these steps are mentioned, and enlargement of military staff to up to 40,000, and intentions of Russia to place military weapons there, and that's a priority place to have nuclear graveyard near Sudak, and that number of armaments. We didn't have even under Soviet Union so much weapons there. I would like to give the floor to Grygoriy Perepelytsia, and I hope that's what I wanted to. Because you are an international expert, speak about the NATO summit. What do you think about militarization of Crimea, and what do you think in NATO in resolving the issue of Crimea? NATO strategy in 2000 as to Black Sea region was built on the principle of cooperation and creation of such initiatives as, for example, Black Sea Force, and a group that was supported to develop that cooperation between all the countries of the Black Sea region, to demonstrate openness and common efforts to stand against two threats on the Black Sea region. And we remember such instruments of that strategy, NATO strategy, in Chernomorski mega district as a partnership for peace, and this common trainings is Segiy, cooperative partner, and some other trainings which was supposed to demonstrate the stability and security of the Black Sea region and efforts of all the Black Sea countries to provide the stability. But we have to say that Black Sea region was the most unstable region on all the flanks borders of NATO. If Baltic region was quite well defended, except Finland and Sweden, although all the rest are more NATO members, and NATO had full control over that region and had close cooperation with neutral countries, with Sweden and Finland. But Black Sea region was always an open border of NATO, southeastern flank, and NATO was trying to hold a neutral position as to those big threats. And I mean frozen conflicts, Karabakh, Ossetia, and Transnistria, and finally Russian aggression of 2008 and against Georgia, where NATO used only diplomatic gestures, and we didn't see a tough reaction, and they stopped a strategic partnership for temporary between Russia and NATO, which then was again renewed, because the main attention NATO paid to Afghanistan, and Ukraine experts, including myself, we criticized that position severely, because spreading efforts to faraway regions, which are not a direct threat to NATO, it would bring to the threats on the borders with NATO, and that was happened with the beginning of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Now, this summit shows that NATO paid attention to that, noticed fundamental, and what is of concern to NATO, that in the Black Sea region there is no balance of power, which was for the benefit of NATO, not for the benefit of Russia. When NATO is losing such a status quo in the balance of powers, and it loses influence on its region, that balance is abused, balance of powers, and with the annexation of Crimea, Russia broke that structure of security which they were building in 90s and 2000 based on different initiatives and programs of cooperation in security field. Although that was destroyed, it makes no sense to continue all those initiatives and trainings of peacekeeping, etc. What does make sense? Renovation of a new balance, or establishing a new balance of powers, which would allow NATO to have a powerful influence on this region. Is NATO mature enough for that? It's very difficult to answer. If you look at those statements of the Secretary General of NATO and State Secretary of the US, Kerry, and he had a meeting right away, as you see, and that line of Obama continues, the line of recharging. So Russia continues, the US continues to considers Russia as its partner in solving global security issues, and first of all, Syria and Iran nuclear program situation, and in the Middle East related to events in Yemen and Islamic State, etc. That's the main strategic partner of the US. Ukraine is secondary here, and probably the Black Sea region, as Ukraine, is not of a concern for the US than Afghanistan or Middle East. So, in the near future, we will not see any new strategy of NATO as to the Black Sea region, though the situation is very worrisome. Taras gave you a list of those reasons as to change of the military balance for the benefit of Russia. I have to say that Black Sea region for Russia is not just a closed lake or a region. Black Sea region is of key importance to spread geopolitical influence on Balkans, Middle East, Caspian region, Iran. That's why it's not by chance. And the Mediterranean region. That's why there will be control over them, over that Mediterranean region and Black Sea region. What is happening? Why Russia is militarizing the Crimean Peninsula? Of course, one of the tasks is to prevent any return of Crimea to Ukraine, and in that sense, I would like to ask the President Poroshenko, who states that will take Crimea back, and I want to always ask how. In mid-term prospect, I don't see any precondition to take Crimea back to Ukraine. First of all, as Taras told, Russia is turning Crimea in a powerful, not sinkable aircraft carrier. Crimea is interesting to Russia, not because only of mental issues of the greatness of Russia, but also from the point of view of military strategic. It's not. That's why 90% of Black Sea fleet was Black Sea Navy was based in Crimea. Crimean Peninsula is not only a military fortress, military and sea fortress, but also a land fortress. Though they're going on to send new frigates and a new division of submarines, all of them will with missiles, but also the coast group. They will move missiles and anti-aircraft defense, and also they will launch land forces and also nuclear weapons. I have to say that a nuclear arsenal was in Crimea in the Soviet Union, but it was not as big, and there was some nuclear ammunition for aircrafts and also missiles for submarines. There was a system anti-submarines bombs, and that's all. That also there were missiles on a small shops, and they could fly 120 kilometers. And the sense of using them, to have them, nobody knows, and maybe it had sense in somehow Russia is moving nuclear weapons to Crimea. It's not only for the Black Sea region. I believe that in the near future they will replace the aviation group, and there will be strategic bombarders and like 222 M3 and 260 they can be based in Oktyabrska on that base, and they get operative strategic radius of action, and that will cover the Middle East, Iran, Central Asia, Balkans, and Eastern Europe. Crimean Peninsula is in the center of the Black Sea region and of the Black Sea. That's a key position, according to which, from which you can have complete control over Black Sea region and Eastern Mediterranean region. And that's why they are planning to turn it into a nuclear base. And this intention is very serious. That's why in March, Putin told that we are ready to use nuclear weapons when we were capturing Crimea. And Russian generals told that if NATO intends to turn Crimea back then, and then Russia would use nuclear weapons against NATO. Intentions are very serious in this sense, but the most important that with the occupation of Crimea, Russia took on itself the majority of the coastline. It's not from 500 to 500, but it's not 500 kilometers, but it's 1,500 on the close. One controls the theater, who controls the longer coastline. Since the coastline of Russia became 3 times bigger, so by fact Russia returned full control over Black Sea region, over Black Sea and Black Sea region. And because if you look at the map, on the map of placement of military bases, they started from Armenia, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Novorossiysk, Ferdossia, Sevastopol, Novozorna, and all of that. That is the system of bases plus Transnistria. In such a way, we have such a curve of military presence of Russia, which allows Russia to return full control over Black Sea region and to turn Black Sea into Russian lake, like it was during Soviet times. Will NATO somehow return? Will it be able to return that counterbalance? It's very difficult to say, because from that summit that were there, I did not notice such intentions. Thank you very much for such a deep analysis about the strategy of NATO. And I'll ask Igor Koziy to comment the role of Turkey in the possible resolution of the conflict, taking into consideration that Turkey started to change the position. We know that formally supporting Western sanctions, Turkey, for long, played the role of a Trojan horse in the alliance, because Turkey replaced many goods that came under the sanctions, and those products from EU that stopped coming. They provided them to Russian market, going around sanctions, and they produced. They continued the work of the airlines, and but Turkey was quite clear. But this double play game will they continue? And on the 13th of May, Prime Minister of Ahmedotov, who spoke with unexpectedly for Russian media, they all of that mentioned that he was very tough, criticizing illegal annexation of Crimea. So such words I will not use by Turkish officials for long. Is that a strategy, new strategy of Turkey, or it's just a trick, or maybe it's a foreign effect? Please, Igor. Thank you for this opportunity to speak here. I will begin with a small story. I wanted to add to what Grygoriy told. And once in the Soviet times in Chisinau, there was a so-called strategic command that was responsible for this direction. And that direction included not only countries like Turkey and Greece, Romania and Italy. In fact, the main role in this direction that was played by Black Sea Navy. Then we saw that these ambitions included Northern Africa, and Grygoriy maybe skipped it, but in fact, if Russian Federation brings into Crimea such serious sets of as 160, then Russia will be able to control not only Arabic region, but in fact, the influence they can go down to India and to cover the Red Sea, and to have to influence on the Indian Ocean. These are former ambitions from the Soviet Union. The only question is this plan gradually implementation of this one, they will have to create additional command, because the command in Rostov-on-Don, it will take care of the Caucasus sooner than issues of the Mediterranean and Black Sea region. Coming back to Turkey, I wanted to say that mention some important things. Don't forget that Ukrbon signed some agreements with Turkish enterprises, defense enterprises, which will allow to create joint projects, to develop joint projects as for land platforms and tanks and armored vehicles and engines, and to participate in some programs which would allow to create elements, sometimes systems, that will belong to air platforms. Understanding that, probably this is a reaction of what we see happening in Syria. Maybe it's an element that Russian Federation, on one hand, they're trying to stimulate all these differences in those countries, ethnic differences. In Syria, somebody can say that that is done because they want to counterbalance Israel, but it's a threat to the whole region. This is one thing. We should not forget that Turkey was always a reliable partner in NATO for the US, but recently, as it was mentioned, they reviewed that. At the same time, as to military aspects and cooperation in NATO, that allowed them to involve some units. First of all, those which were placed to provide security for the south borders of Turkey. Turkey, in my opinion, understands that Russia strengthens itself in Crimea and strengthens what is happening in the framework of creation of so-called illegal like the total unsinkable aircraft area in Crimea for implementation. In Soviet Union, all who disagree with the position of militarization of Crimea will be moved out of Crimea, deported from Crimea. That will include not only Ukrainians, ethnic Ukrainians, but also Crimean Tatars. They start understanding that sooner or later they will be under some threats which come out from spreading defense capabilities of Russian Federation. Because of that, today, in my opinion, there are such statements which are directed at defense because they want to defend from future aggressions. But what I would like to underline, that Turkey will do that in the framework of NATO, and if during the last 5 years we observed that there was the reduction of armed forces of the US in Europe from reduction of from 300,000 to 80,000. So something has to change now, because we have to observe that Russia will enlarge its presence and its capabilities on the southern flank of NATO. NATO cannot do that. Sooner or later, NATO will have to react somehow, because it is a direct threat, not only to Italy, Turkey, and Greece, but also to Spain. And all that belongs to, with such projects like Mistral project, which thank God was not successful, because Mistral is a class of a ship which on one hand can be a ship which carries aviation platforms like airplanes and helicopters, a ship that can transport up to a battalion of Marines, and depending on with equipment or without, and that is a ship which is at the same time is a command post. You understand? You see, it's 1, 2 such ships. They can in the region, in any region, which is under the radius of its influence, it can create a threat. That's why Turkey pays attention to all of those things. What else I would like to mention here? That Mistral, those are ships of new class. By the way, the first one, Italy introduced such ships. Italy was the first, and understanding the importance, amphibious importance of such ships, Russian Federation want to have them because they would give them an opportunity with a small groups of ships to do big policy in the region, to do big politics in the region. Thank you. Thank you, Igor. That's a very threatful assessment. I was impressed with your assessment. You mentioned the word deportation. That's a word. The word. This is a threat with the background of an university of deportation of Crimean Tatars. I will give the floor to Andrei Segiy. I would like him to comment the issue. You mentioned the issue of Mistral. We know that they want to sell them to China as one of the possible variants. But let's speak, Serhiy, let's speak about how that group of troops in Crimea, what kind of danger is that to Ukraine? We speak about NATO, but look what is happening. They reanimate those airports, Soviet airports that I remember that they were all closed, so they were poorly. Like Berezovets airport, we know that test field in Feodosia of Ukrainian armed forces, which is under control of Russian armed forces. We know on that test field, they prepare paratroopers, that infiltrators that brought to Donbass, and very often they are from Crimea. Now Russia started to recruit Crimeans to Russian army. They will enlist 3,000 Crimeans to serve in armed forces of Russian Federation. It is declared that all of them will serve in Crimea. So, Serhiy, how realistic that those they can run, those forces can do offense, how Ukraine is ready on Kherson, and how true it is that Russia does not have experience of successful paratroopers campaigns using Marines. Is it true or not? Could we expect not only on land, but also could we expect paratroopers from air or from the sea? Thank you very much. I would like to mention that NATO, it's important that NATO paid attention to the south of Europe, and it's closer to Ukraine. There was a NATO summit in Turkey, and there was a part on Crimea, because they paid a lot of attention to Baltic states, and we are happy that NATO strengthens its borders and positions, and they introduce additional military formations in Baltic countries, Romania, Bulgaria. But what about Ukraine? Here, I told. Militarization of Crimea, that's a threat for Europe and for NATO, and militarization of Crimea is enlarging, and how events can happen, can develop. As a response, countries of the Black Sea region, they will enlarge their military budget, and Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania will do that. And what's next? On one hand, Is it positive for NATO? Is it correct to start this conflict when there is a big group of Russian troops in Crimea and a big parity group of NATO countries in the Black Sea region? What will be the results? How will that influence on Ukraine? The main policy of NATO should be focused on common activities with the EU and to continue pressure on Russia. So, if that unsinkable aircraft carrier exists, it should get dry, because all there should be economic sanctions and pressure on Russian economy. And I believe that that road would be more peaceful and would give better results, because economic sanctions means a peaceful way to solve the actions. And when sanctions are in action, soldiers leave, and sanctions, they work in a way that they press on the Russian Federation.
As regards, generally speaking, well, if this military potential, Russian military potential in the Crimea and the possible use of the human potential, material technical base, whatever was left of the weapons station in Ukraine, we know that almost everything remained there, with the exception of what has been withdrawn. This is going to be targeted on Ukraine. This is a long-term strategy of Russia, one at the expense of some of the enslaved nations. They try to enslave another nation. They send here the Chechnya people, other ethnic minority people, because this is the attitude of Kremlin to the minor nations. Here in Ukraine, they kill Ukrainians for Putin. This is something positive, because he has been dreaming about that for a long time. If they kill the Chechen people for Russia, maybe it's cynical to say that, but maybe this is not really bad for Russia, because the number of the rebels from Chechnya will be decreased, because this is a region, Chechnya, I mean, which actually strives to be separated from Russia in the perspective. So using the potential of the Crimea, which was annexed by Russia, they are going to target or direct all this potential against Ukraine. Our Crimea, our Crimean potential is going to be targeted on us, and they are going to, let's say, to drop those youngs who never wanted to wage war against Ukraine, but when they are drafted as privates, they have to stick to their oaths, and if they are given the weapons and they have an order to shoot Ukrainians, they will be forced to do that. This is another signal sent to the West, and NATO has to understand that, God forbid, but if Russia to some in this or another manner is going to enslave Ukraine, they are going to use later, I mean, Russia, the potential of Ukraine against Europe and NATO. That's why we have to be very active on the part of NATO. I mean, but we unfortunately do not see any resolute steps or any statements, and we have to talk about that. We have to mention that, because we are interested when NATO strengthens itself as its structure, but since we are part of the European security space and European space, generally speaking, we would like to see in the NATO more adequate response or actions. And the fact that the military potential of Russia in the Crimea can be used against Ukraine, I have no doubt about that. In case of the large-scale military operation, when we are talking about the attack of Russian troops on Mariupol, but the same attack could be from the west on the Crimea, and actually to discuss that issue, what kind of operations could be more or less successful. And Russia, since then, 2004, has been planning this kind of capture in Ukraine. That's why the use of this potential is absolutely hazardous and dangerous for our country. Now, maybe our experts can see that this is on the slide. This is the ethnic composition of the Russian troops which occupied the Crimea, and it's natural. The Russians are the biggest ethnic group 40%. What is interesting, the second large, Bashkirs, Kazan Tatars, and Tuva people. Chechnya, 20% of the troops. Ukraine placed a force, 10%, and the rest Armenians. Again, among the SWAT groups, 60% Russians and other, let's say, Chechnya, Tuva, and Kazan Tatars, Dagestanians, 30%, and the same. We still have the one more expert, Oleksandr Musienko, who is the leader of the military legal research. So my question to you is as follows. We know that for many years the Russian Federation encountered the danger and hazard on the part of the international terrorism, which actually emerged because of the actions of Russia in the Northern Caucasus, in two Chechnya wars, etc. We know that the Russian media in due time threatened Ukraine, because we know that the representatives of the Chechnya, I'm talking about that part of the Chechnya people who waged war against Putin, they were treated in the Crimean hospital among the Crimean Tatars, and Russia used to say that you have some terrorist attacks and explosions and whatnot. This never happened. But speaking about the increase of the danger territory of Crimea, who is the author of this possible potential threat? The Russian special forces, as Oleksandr Litvinenko mentioned that, now the late Oleksandr Litvinenko, his book, when he quotes the facts that FSB and Putin themselves actually planned this kind of wage war, and even in the times of Yeltsin. So how much the threat of international terrorism in Crimea increases? Who could be the person interested in this, clients, I would say, and how this danger coming from the Crimea could threaten our bordering regions like Mykolaiv, Kherson, and other regions. Thank you. I would like to echo what has been said before. Very interesting and grounded comments we heard from them, but I would like to, first of all, to provide my comments in the global aspect and then to answer your question directly. So I would like to draw attention to the fact that what happened over the last few months, specifically, I'm talking about the events or developments in Iran. Speaking about the policy pursued by the United States regarding Iran, we know about the possible lifting of sanctions against Iran. After this, the Russian Federation declared that they were prepared to deliver missile complex R-300 to this country. The leader of Iran, the Khan, actually spoke in favor of this kind of partnership and cooperation, military cooperation included with Russia. Later in April, when they held the Peace and Security Conference in Moscow, attended also by the leader of Iran, who I mentioned before, he mentioned very interesting thing that Russia, China, and Iran, and then also involvement of the countries of the BRICS organization, Brazil and India, which I didn't mention. We have to develop and build the collective security system to oppose NATO forces. Since NATO is expanding further to the east, Iran proposed this kind of form of cooperation. This idea was immediately supported by many Russian experts, Iran experts, and in particular Pepe Escobar, an observer of the Russia Today channel, among other things, the Russian TV channel. He mentioned that Russia, Iran, and China by all means have to build or create the missile or rocket shield. Somebody was skeptical about this statement, somebody supported and actually approved this statement, but anyway, this idea exists, Now in the context of militarization of the Crimea, we can clearly trace the line put it this way, that this idea actually has a right to life. And the signs of this militarization and increased weapons stationed or in the Crimea could be one of the let's say, links in the chain of creating this kind of missile shield, which is the point of the future agreement between China, Iran, and Russia. Actually, what is also associated with the mentioned, I mean, Mr. Kerry's visit to Russia, and in my opinion, this topic was discussed rather actively. And it's not in vain that in Turkey they held the NATO summit meeting. I believe that this issue was among others during this meeting, and it's clear that President of the United States, Obama, mentioned that we can actually suspend, or even not more maybe, but perhaps they will suspend this kind of sanctions against Russia if Iran will going to pursue such kind of policy. So the Crimea can become one of those links or elements, if you will, of this Russian, Iranian, and Chinese program. In my opinion, perhaps this will have some positive effect maybe for Ukraine, however strange it may sound, because this is going to attract more attention or draw more attention on the European community, EU and NATO, and the pressure on Russia could be increased in the context of occupation of the Crimea, in the context of further liberation of the Crimea. Now, speaking about the increase of growth of terrorism, definitely with the coming of Russian Federation, there the Russian Federation starts this kind of, I put it this way, kind of repressions, which are the signs of the building of totalitarian society. And we are talking about the intimidation campaign, and in this policy on Russia, in the context of creating such a totalitarian society, is meant to sow fear in all these samplings, or kind of which appear in the civil society, or some kind of national liberation ideas which emerge in the Crimea, they would like to suppress that in the bud. And the major target is to intimidate the people, to sow the fear, and this is no policy pursued by Russia, because in Russia, they believe it is the norm, this kind of intimidation, and they have a saying to lose fear. This is bad for Russians, though for any normal civilized society, not to have this feeling of fear is normal thing, you know. And Russia is very sticks to these policies through their special services and the law enforcement agencies, acting against such the small growth of the liberation. I mean, those who support Ukraine, support the Crimean Tatar, who actually condemn the occupation of Crimea, etc. So I would like also to draw attention to the following fact that we have kind of symbiosis in the Crimea, because those acting leaders of the Crimea, you should not forget that they are associated with the criminal world. And you can imagine when FSB and the criminal world enter into such kind of symbiosis, this could be even more dangerous than when the FSB is the leader of such operations, because such comrades, so to say, who are they can overdo something, they make something in excession, and even do more than the curators order them to do. That's why, in my opinion, the situation becoming available today, this is kind of, if you're talking about the terrorist threat, it threatens not only the Crimea, but also the Ukraine as a whole. But there were some proofs and evidence that the Crimea is the territory where the Russian sabotage groups are trained, who can be then moved to Donbass or to some other regions and could have something to do with the terrorist acts. which took place recently in Odessa and Kharkov. In other words, they can create in the Crimea kind of platform or foothold just to prepare such terrorist groupings on the territory of the bigger Ukraine, so to say. And this is the biggest threat, in my opinion, because for some time in the Crimea they're going to have kind of relative, let's say, calm situation, because they now have faced some of the task of the militarization. They're concentrated, focused on this. Maybe this will happen later when social, let's say, dissatisfaction or social protests will emerge in case of the probability, and this is a probability, that the tourist season is going to fail. Not only the tourist season, but generally the economic situation today is quite detrimental now and not really good. In order to suppress all those, let's say, the beginning of these kind of protests, the Russians can use whatever can imagine, including what has been mentioned, terrorist acts. These possible threats, but for the bigger Ukraine, the threat is bigger to the Ukraine as a whole than to the Crimea. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander, for a most interesting assessment. And we can see that our experts talked about some of the issues associated with the militarization of Crimea. Esteemed colleagues, we have some time for your questions, so please address and mention who.
I have a question. Which military factories were nationalized by Russia in Crimea? What weapons they produced, who can produce them, and how big is the threat for Ukraine? In Crimea, I cannot tell you that we had very big enterprises that produced weapons. The only thing is that one serious enterprise in Feodosia, which produced not modern but quite modern projects of sea platforms, ships on air pad, and also we should not forget that in Sevastopol there was a quite powerful base of maintenance, very serious maintenance base to repair ships. If you understand that on a ship, ships have different weapons, and so small enterprises, they were providing services to communication. They supported repaired and weapons, new equipment, etc., etc. So, in this sense, we can say, yes, when we lost Crimea, we lost approximately 12, 15 enterprises that were a part of Ukроборонпром. Now, that situation is without any change. It's not clear. During the last months, there was information that we nationalized Sevastopol. They nationalized Sevastopol ship repair and factory, and that belonged to the president of Ukraine. I would like to add that Crimea was not an industrial base in the military fields, and also it was not an industrial base. But what was important for Crimea, as Igor says, that there was mostly on shipbuilding and ship maintenance for the Navy, Black Sea Navy. As a Feodosia Enterprise Moria, that was an experimental factory, and they had very good an engineering unit to develop new technologies. And ships of a new type, that use quite a different means of movement, ekranoplanes, and they were producing them in the 80s in that design institute, and they were built the whole division of ekranoplanes, and they were moved to the Caspian Sea. Also, there was, I don't know what is Kerch ship building and maintenance shipyard, and they produced 1135 ships. As we have information, Russia is going to support that Feodosia factory, and they donate some money for them not to die. But Crimea is different. It was used as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. There are a lot of systems, one in strategic and even one in Sevastopol. A lot of units of for space communication, and also good opportunities for China. I don't expect any terrorist acts in Crimea. Why? Because militarization has consequences, quite big consequences for movement, control over civilians, and it seems to me that now quite the opposite. There will be military repressive regime. They will strengthen it in Crimea, and when administrative authorities will come from half criminal to law enforcers. So the peninsula will be run by military administration. There will be the practice of closed cities. Sevastopol will become a closed city, Saki, and some others. So all the peninsula will become a closed territory, and it will be clearly under control of Russian special services. And it's clear that terrorism, there will be no terrorism. We cannot expect terrorism there. The other thing, that Crimea was always a center of training, very good training center for subversive forces and for terrorist operations. And there was a very good center, and is in Kamyshovo harbor, the most big center to train underwater subversive campaigns. There was also a very good school to train terrorists to support pro-communist regimes in third world countries. In that sense, Crimea was very good. Because of climate, it's very close to African continent, to Central Asia, to Central America. These centers, training centers of terrorists that will work in the interest of Russian special services on different continents, they will renew that capability again. My question to Grygoriy Perepelytsia. Crimean ecologists and the majority of experts believe that to return Crimea officially to Ukraine, if we want that, we need to stop water. And if there's a threat, we should switch off electricity, and also we should reduce passenger flows, cargo flows to that territory. What's your opinion about this? And if Ukraine crisis media center will allow me, a question to Igor Koziy. Under Soviets on up to 2014, only Sevastopol, hero city, as a base of the Navy, Black Sea Navy. It was a target for nuclear. It was a nuclear site for NATO. Are there more such facilities? Russian Federation, have they changed the site on the strategic nuclear weapons to other cities and territories of Ukraine? Thank you. First of all, as to poles of Ukraine, I don't see any policy of Ukraine as to Crimea. in addition to statements of the president that we will return Crimea and in the nearest future, he doesn't say how. How can we return Crimea? It means that we don't have a strategy or even techniques as to Crimea. And we observe some surrealism of this government as to Crimea. At the same time, we announce Crimea this is an occupied area and free trade zone. Who can fit those two things in the mind? If we have such disorder in the heads of our leadership, what kind of policy, more or less clear policy or vision, can we discuss here? That's why I don't see that this government can use any efficient instrument, including the issue of water. Also, there is more smuggling from Ukraine to Crimea, and we suggest to Crimea gas, water, and they refuse to have it. So what can we discuss here? I don't see that this government will have more or less a clear and all productive policy towards Crimea. Very briefly, in addition to Sevastopol, nobody considered Crimea. Nobody thought about Crimea as something any powerful. If we speak about technical nuclear weapons, that's not a serious issue, and there is a plan in the process of operations. As to Russian Federation towards Ukraine, I think not, because Russian Federation had ships in Sevastopol as to NATO towards Sevastopol. I don't exclude, but that depends on behavior of Russian Federation. As I told you, that Russian Federation will look for new bloc to control NATO in the south, because Rostov-Don, as northern Caucasus district, will not be able to control both Crimea and the Caucasus on the southern flank of NATO. But it's a big geopolitics, and on this stage, I doubt it's clear. What do you think? Do you have a strategy of defense from threats, sea threats, and in the Black Sea and Azov Sea? Well, can we respond if there is a threat, if there is an offensive from the sea? It's even it's difficult. It's horrible to say that we have a military sea strategy. It was developed during the first years of independent Ukraine, but it was not approved. There was an association of sea sailors, and they were trying to develop a sea doctrine, and they had to develop the sea policy of Ukraine, but it was not realized, and that sea policy of Ukraine. But now they to close down as navy as forces of Ukraine. Mr. Poltorak luckily doesn't support that idea, but what we have from the navy, we lost, except one ship, Saidachny, we lost all the navy. I mean ships. That's why we'll have to rebuild our navy from zero, and that's very expensive, but that is necessary. Also, now we'll have to rebuild in a new way the infrastructure of bases for our navy, because in Soviet times they destroyed the base in Ochakov, which was quite powerful, and also they destroyed all the infrastructure of the navy starting from Ismail and down to Crimean Peninsula. So everything was on Crimean Peninsula. So that's why we lost all infrastructure to base our navy. Now we have only some segments like navy, aviation, sea aviation in Mykolaiv. So, and we have to build the navy from the scratch, and there's a big problem. I'll add some optimism here. There were efforts. Don't forget that we have, at least on paper, we have a project of the design of corvette, and some people on private enterprises in the Netherlands, and I think about this. It's like with Mistral to have 4 corvettes, and the 2 in the Netherlands, 2 in Ukraine on the base of Mykolaiv, and for that we need to come for that, because the Netherlands can help us as a NATO country and also as a serious sea state. As to negative, I would like to add that, believe me, the main problem was always and is in people. And when the navy is run by someone who was a sailor who was using small boats, it's not the same like someone who can use more serious and powerful ships. In the history of Ukraine, we had a serious person, Admiral Beskorovany, who was running a unit of ships. So Ukraine has potential. What we don't have the support of the society and understanding in the government that Ukraine is the sea state, and we can defend with that element. We can defend our economic interests. Yes, as Churchill told, and the UK has the biggest 2 allies, British Army and British Navy. This is a very good summary for our briefing, and it was one of the most interesting discussions for me. And we should say hello to Federal Service of Security, and I know that they were keeping a track of our discussion. And as a producer of James Bond, James will return in the next part, and Crimea will return in next week when we discuss the situation with sports infrastructure of the peninsula, how it was destroyed, how soccer in football in Ukraine and Crimea was destroyed, and this is a big holiday today, and support Ukrainian representative who has a chance, Dnipro had a chance, they have a chance to get to the final of the European League, and thank you very much for the meeting with you.